Nate Diaz is a terrible boxer and he's about to get knocked the f out by Jake Paul. Is what I see a lot of people saying going into Nate's boxing debut on August 5th, but how true really is it? Let's find out by breaking down his skills. So Nate Diaz is an MMA specialist. He made a name for himself in the UFC. He's not a traditional boxer, but he does a lot of his best work on the feet. And while he is a Gracie black belt in MMA, he is very boxing heavy. A lot of the times he likes to trade and bang with guys, using his striking and pretty heavy on the lead leg, leaving him kind of susceptible to leg kicks. But he's an unorthodox striker. You're not going to see anyone really fight like Nate Diaz. He's really one of a kind. He throws from all angles. His fighting style usually throws a lot of his opponents off. In pure boxing, he doesn't have the greatest defense. Nate's not the fastest, he's not the strongest, he's not the most powerful guy, but he has some key attributes that are really important and wins him a lot of fights. Those being his durability, his toughness, his willingness to take a shot, to come forward and throw from all different angles. He leans into a lot of his shots just to really emphasize them, and he has really unique timing that a lot of people aren't used to seeing. For example, he'll throw his 1-2 or his combinations immediately after one another. He won't just take his time and be patient, wait for openings to happen. He will single-handedly create those openings, go after them, and chase them until he ultimately gets what he wants. The timing in between his shots are so minimal, and it's not something that a lot of people who are traditional boxers are used to seeing. And while it has its pros and cons, his style definitely does work in certain situations. We've never seen Nate in pure boxing, we've only seen his striking and boxing in MMA. He'll eat shot after shot and pretty much just zombie-like keep walking forward and keep throwing. He honestly gets better the more the rounds go on. His cardio, his pace is different than anyone really. We've seen him hurt and he's been dropped multiple times. That's something scary for Nate Diaz in boxing, because if he's just consistently taking constant punishment, he can't really do anything about it. Taking headshot after headshot, he can have some real damage put onto him. And while a good chin/toughness is a good trait to have, it's not exactly something that is good to be known for. It's great to have that if ever needed, but you can't just rely on that as a fighter. Like in his second fight against Conor McGregor, he was dropped 3 times in the first couple of rounds. And he was able to come back from that, keep pouring the pressure on, and that's how he gained his notoriety from beating Conor McGregor in their first fight. Conor McGregor punching himself out at a new higher weight class. And Nate was simply just able to take advantage of that. He waited for Conor to get tired and then he started lighting him up on the feet, mixing up different strikes, being technical, and Nate is a southpaw. Jake's only fought one southpaw before in Anderson Silva. He did well with him, but Nate Diaz is a completely different problem. Yes, he's older, he's not as slick as a boxer, he's maybe not trained specifically in boxing as much as Jake. I'll say right now, it's not beautiful boxing, it's not pretty, but it does work. Jake has never seen a guy that will be able to eat as much punches as Nate Diaz, keep walking forward, and get better as the rounds go on. Jake's never really fought an athlete with the pressure and the pace that Nate Diaz will bring. Even though he's older now and he's definitely not the same Nate he used to be, especially considering the mileage and how many wars this guy has been in the UFC. It's still Nate Diaz, he is still tricky. He's very feint heavy, he mixes things up and trash talks his opponents in the middle of the fight. But honestly, that can cost him at times, like in his fight against Leon Edwards. He rocked Leon, who is now the current welterweight UFC world champion. And instead of just going right on him and trying to finish the job, he was just pointing at him, showboating. And instead of actually winning the fight, just taking the moral victory there. He likes to point at his opponents, slap his opponents, and get in their head. I don't see that being any different in a fight against Jake Paul. And when watching Nate in pure boxing and some spars and some footage that we've seen of him, it's not pretty and it's not like he can really improve his technical boxing in a couple of months of training. But he has his own style that will work against lower level opposition. While he is going up in weight to fight Jake Paul, who's a bit more explosive than him, faster, probably stronger. That isn't everything that wins fights. Nate Diaz likes to bring people into the deeper waters, and that's what he's going to try to do against Jake Paul. He has to take Jake to where he's never been before, and this is 10 rounds, so he has a lot of time to work. In a lot of Nate Diaz's fights and a lot of Nate Diaz's losses, if he had a couple of extra rounds, he could have easily hurt his opponents, potentially stopped his opponents. Like his fights against Leon Edwards, obviously Conor McGregor. Nate's a triathlete and he's literally doing multiple triathlons going into the Jake Paul fight. This guy's been fighting all his life, that's really all he knows. He wasn't ever a world champion in the UFC, but he always fought a lot of the best guys. Pretty much all of his fights were against ranked opponents, tough opposition, and the guy's literally never been knocked out cold. The only time that he was really stopped on his feet was against Josh Thompson, when he ate a huge head kick that would literally put out anyone. The problem with Nate is he has a lot of defensive holes. In the UFC, whenever he gets dropped, he pulls guard. Obviously, being a jiu-jitsu guy, a lot of people don't want to roll around on the ground with him, as he's very dangerous there, but in a fight against Jake Paul, there is no pulling guard. There is no groundwork, so when Nate hits the floor, he has to get straight back up. And they have to go straight back into action, where if Nate gets dropped, Jake's going to come forward straight away and pretty much do everything he can to stop Nate, because that's really his bread and butter. So is Nate Diaz a real professional boxer at a high level? Definitely not. We got to take him for what he is. He's an MMA guy going into boxing. He's maybe a bit unorthodox, but he's never boxed before. He's going into his first boxing match. And on a technical standpoint, well, he does have some very positive attributes. As a pure boxer, Nate is definitely not the best. Is he going to get knocked out by Jake Paul in 1 round? I'm not so sure about that. He's durable, he's tough, he doesn't usually get stopped in fights. This is a different weight class for Nate. It's a completely different sport and a completely different game. There's a reason Jake Paul is the big favorite going into this one. But let me know your predictions in this fight in the comments down below. But yeah, that's going to be it. And on the topic of Jake Paul, check out one of my last videos on why KSI versus Jake Paul may never happen. Thank you all so much for 10,000 subscribers, and I'm going to continue giving you all the best content I can.